Hello everybody, good afternoon. It's lovely to be here again. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Upchurch. I'm from Consumers International. I'm here to talk to you about the consumer perspective on carbon consciousness, in particular who's responsible for it. Before we do that, I just want the obligatory slide is about what Consumers International is or are, for those who haven't heard of us. We're the Global Federation of Consumer Organisations. So we have 220 member organisations in over 115 countries. And we represent their work, their policy, their advocacy demands at an international level. We're independent and non-profit. We're actually a registered charity in the United Kingdom. And as I mentioned, we do the global research and campaigns for and through our member organisations. And you can probably see from the little graphic up here, we're 50 this year. So happy birthday to us. Just to give you a specific on what we do on climate change. We have ongoing campaigns on sustainable consumption, access to energy, and things like green claims. We're the leading NGO in the Marrakesh process. That's the UN framework for trying to get countries to act on sustainable development and consumption. And we also lead them in the UN CSD, which is the UN body that's dealing with sustainable consumption, which began in Rio 20 years ago and will come to a head in a year or so's time. And then we also do quite a bit of research into what assures consumers on climate change. So what are the issues that make them feel that they can engage on low GHG products and things like that? Okay, so what is the state of climate consciousness within consumers? Got a Homer Simpson there, model citizen. But I do jest that it's not quite that bad, but there is a lot of things that need to be done, a lot of action that needs to be taken to move consumers to where we all want them to be, and I think there's a lot of people here that have a responsibility or a role in trying to get that across. Okay. Consumer understanding of climate change issues has been knocked by the failure of world leaders at Copenhagen, the highly publicised controversy over the science and the day-to-day realities of the global economic downturn. In terms of carbon consciousness, there is a concern that the further erosion of trust in politicians to lead, in scientists to tell the truth, and in businesses to put green issues at the top of their agenda in uncertain economic times will halt or even reverse consumer engagement. So that's not to make a comment on the science, that's not to make a comment on the ability or not of leaders to reach an agreement. It's to make a comment on the perception, and that, for me, is key here. Now, this isn't going to be a presentation full of empirical data, but I do want to kind of give you a couple of slides to give you an idea of consumer thought and how we understand what people are doing out there at the moment. This is quite a worrying slide. It shows the percentage who strongly agree that the environmental movement is a passing fad. So you can see it's holding up quite strongly there in some of the major European economies. But in other parts of the world, environmental issues are seen as a short-term issue. If you look at India there, over 40% believe that the environmental problem is something that's going to go away, which we find an extremely worrying trend, and may relate back to some of the things that we've seen with leaders not being able to push a decent deal in Copenhagen, and then the way that problems or issues with the science have been relayed in mainstream media. Of course, with this kind of data, there are always opposite trends which we can look at as well. I think this is quite an interesting slide here. The percentage of consumers that feel that industry and corporations are not doing enough on climate change. This was from last year. You can see those figures are still very, very high across Europe. 70-80% feel very strongly that there's more that can be done from industry, and that for me is a key issue, because it does show, or it points towards a strong foundation layer of climate consciousness. The consumer movement, we're convinced that there is a desire amongst consumers to engage and act on climate change. The issue is in what they can do, and that is where there is still a lot of confusion amongst consumers. A bit of our own research from a recent study in this area, when we looked at what was assuring consumers on issues of climate change. 66% of consumers in the UK and the US believe that everybody needs to take a responsibility for their contribution to global warming. But 2/3 of consumers are still demanding that governments and businesses take a stronger role. Crucial one for me though here, much potential consumer action is prevented due to feelings of disempowerment and demotivation. So disempowerment and demotivation, I think, looks at a key issue here of trust, of belief, of there not being an understanding amongst consumers about what they can actually do, and that's leaving them feeling disempowered and demotivated. This is a really striking figure from the Network for Business Sustainability from this year, or from last year, sorry. They show that in terms of predicting consumer actions, belief that one's purchasing decisions could have an impact was 6 times more reliable as an indicator than the level of one's concern about the environment. So in other words, belief and trust in a low GHG impact of a product has a far higher impact on consumer decision making than general concern about climate change. This is, we feel, why trust is so important and has such a key role in turning intention into action. Because at the end of the day, climate consciousness is fine and all well and good, but until you can move that consciousness or move that feeling and that intention into action, the problem is not solved. We're not getting anywhere. So this is a crucial element for us. So where does the responsibility lie for changing that? Who needs to take responsibility for getting consumers into a mindset or getting consumers to actually purchase low GHG products and services? One can argue that intention among consumers is high, but this is not translating into action, that the thinking is not making the transition into the doing. Now, this kind of statement is used by some to demonstrate that consumers are not really as green as they say they are. But I feel, and we feel, that shirks the responsibility of other players in this problem, namely governments and industry. We feel the governments and industry really do need to lead, to push and pull consumer feeling into an actual purchasing decision, to move consumer thoughts into consumer deeds. Here's a great figure from a Deloitte survey in 2007. 95% of consumers said they would buy green, but then later on in the study, the survey revealed that only 75% knew what a green product was. There's that disconnect between intent and action again. The first hurdle for raising consumer consciousness about what a green product does and what a green product is, and how it can make a meaningful impact, is very important. Trying to get that information across. And consumer groups, corporations, governments, we all have a role in making that happen. But just as important is avoiding something like greenwashing. So avoiding marketing products and services as green when in actual fact they have little or no impact on GHG. Crucially, greenwashing risks turning consumers off genuine green alternatives, and that is crucial to all of the work that is being done here. If we lose the consumer through over-marketing or over-egging an issue, we may risk not getting them back, and all the good work here is not treated with the kind of attention that it deserves. CI takes greenwashing very seriously. Every year we do a Bad Company Award. Last year we dedicated the entire process to greenwashing around the world. Our members used that information to great effect to raise awareness about greenwashing. Here's some of the winners here, or losers. I won't go into details, but if you do want more information on that, I'll be happy to talk about that offline. Or maybe you want me to share them, I don't know. Do you want them? Okay. So to tackle greenwash, these are just some of the things that we want to see as the consumer movement. Companies to commit publicly to ethical marketing when it comes to green claims and follow agreed codes of practice on this. Governments to approach green claims in the same way that they do tobacco or junk food advertising. We feel that it needs that kind of severity. The way that tobacco products or junk food are restricted in terms of marketing, we feel that the same needs to be done to something like green claims to ensure that the consumer trust is upheld. And then consumer groups need to act as watchdogs on this, and this is something we do, continuing to build on and working with our members as well. But there's still another problem aside from green claims, aside from greenwashing, and that's confusion still reigns. Homer still doesn't get it. And that's partly because of the amount of information that's out there, the amount of different claims that we are seeing. This is leading to confusion. There is no clarity and often no consistency in what the claims are saying. There are too many claims, and the lack of clarity about what is included and what is self-declared, or what actually constitutes a good product. All of these kind of issues are leading to consumer confusion, and we want to see some kind of standardized approach so that we all are speaking the same language when it comes to what constitutes a green product. This slide gives an idea of consumer support for this kind of approach, particularly in terms of carbon footprinting. Should a label include a carbon footprint as mandatory in the future? Very high figures across Europe for support amongst consumers for that. They want to see this information, they want to see it clearly, they want to have a consistency, and they want to have a clarity there. So in terms of green claims, in terms of what we need to see there, companies need to show clarity on labels so a consumer knows what's covered. If an issue is looking just at carbon, then that needs to be clear. If it's got more issues or is making more claims, then that needs to be clear as well, because the levels of information that we're getting across is confusing. And that's not even to touch on the issue of how much information a consumer should be having. Companies need to appeal to mainstream and avoid chasing niche consumer sections. This is key as well. There's consumers out there that understand green issues. They understand what a carbon footprint is, but that's a small niche right at the top. There's a massive gulf in the middle where people feel concerned but do not have this kind of terminology or aren't familiar with this type of terminology. We need to find ways of communicating to that big group in the middle. Governments must lead on choice editing to remove high GHG products from the start. That takes out this whole problem of communication in a way. If we can remove the products so consumers don't even have the choice, then we don't need to worry them, simplifying the issue slightly, but we don't need to worry them with the information about the carbon footprint there. Let's get rid of the bad products, and that should just be a standard approach which we want to see pushed forward. And also they need to lead on the legislative frameworks so that businesses have a clear understanding about what this entails and can adapt accordingly. And as I've said, we must all work towards standardized, mandatory information wherever we can. Okay, CI has a long history in advocating for clarity and harmonization on labeling and certification. We're currently coordinating global discussions on ethical trade claims, where we're bringing together stakeholders from around the world to discuss what ethics means in labeling, what fair trade means. So it's a different discussion to this one, but very similar issues that we are experiencing. And one of the things that we're seeing is, that is the hardest thing to do, to reach a standard understanding and an agreed language on what ethics means. And we need to do the same type of thing and organise the same type of discussions on the issue of product carbon footprinting and climate change labelling. And that such clarity can only help focus consumer climate consciousness and provide that common language which is needed. Now I've just touched on some of the issues here, but one of the things I think is clear is that a coordinated approach is needed so that we do not overwhelm and confuse people like Homer. To change the behaviour, to turn that intent into action, and to alter consumer consciousness, to get Homer to buy green, takes a commitment from all quarters to engage consumers on these issues and make sure that we bring them with us in these efforts to lower the impact of products with regards to the environment. That's it.